Good morning, everyone. For those of you who are married here or at home, think of your wedding banquet. What was it like? Who showed up at your banquet? And who's no longer here, who came to your banquet feast? What was exciting about your banquet? What is your unique? Who did the most preparation, your wife or your husband? But as we move from the wedding banquet, think of that transition from your banquet to the mountaintop. Is your spouse still with you? Or are you with someone? Or if your spouse is with you, how are you climbing that mountaintop in Isaiah? Think for a moment. And those of us who are single, decided not to have a wedding banquet. How are we climbing that mountaintop? Many are invited, but few are chosen. Many are invited, but few are chosen. Parables of the wedding banquet is a continuation of what we've been listening as Jesus in the temple of Jerusalem, confronting the scribes and the Pharisees, challenging them in the way that they walking in the path of the Lord. But the reverse is also true. They are also challenging Jesus. Who are you? Who telling us all these things? Who poke fun at us? Or who challenge us the way that we've been practicing the Mosaic traditions that have been passing on from generation to the next. And so every parable is a digging in of the scribes and the Pharisees, of God's chosen people. So Matthew here is also writing to his community to see, here are my God's chosen people. And yet they no longer accept the invitation to be part of the kingdom of God. And so there will be a passing on that this good news will be also given to the Gentiles, to non-Jewish people, non-God chosen people. So we look into this parables in context. That's what Matthew is trying to get at. That God's invitation in the kingdom of God it's open to everybody. There's no longer just a selective chosen people, but it's open to all. So last Sunday I began this whole series, why do we reject God? Why do young people hate or no longer believe in God? Or why do people walk away from their faith or walk away from their loved ones? So last week I explored 3 ideas. First is the ignorance. And second is the search for independence. And the third is the search for identity. And maybe too, for those of you who are married and in family life, you struggle with all of that with your children or within your own self. And so today I want to explore 2 other areas. Why do we reject God, or why do we reject people that we love and care for? First is interest. And second is insecurities. So in the gospel, in parables of the wedding banquet, we see from reading the text why our interest could be different from God's interest. And there may be a reason why we walk away from the Lord and reject God's invitations to come into the banquet of the Lord. It says here, a second time he sent other servants, saying, tell those invited, behold, I have prepared my banquet. My calves and fattened cattle are killed, and everything is ready. Come to the feast. Some ignored the invitation and went away, one to his farm and another to his business. So these are the interests: farming and private businesses. Deter them from entering into the wedding banquet. Are they related to you too in your daily lives? Are your business taking you away from your family, from your loved ones? Are your business keeping you from worshiping the Lord and keep the day of the Lord's Sabbath holy? What is it? Or maybe your interests as young people are so different from your parents. And you say, there is that generation gap. And you keep blaming on that generation gap because to hide away your interest. Or maybe during this pandemic, many of our millennials become so procrastinated in their way of life, in their way of looking for something that they need to do. Maybe their procrastination is their lack of interest. They can't find a purpose, an interest that they want that draws them out. Or they keep looking for the ideal interest that they want to do. So until they find it, they keep procrastinating. Until they find it, they're going to keep rejecting whatever message you have to say to them. So Pope Francis this morning, in this part of the parables of the wedding feast, this is what he has to reflect upon. God's generosity versus our selfishness. He said here, imagine of the Father's generosity and extravagant love for humanity. So often we put our interests and material things ahead of the Lord who calls us. The king persists in his desire to share the gifts of his kingdom, ordering his servants to go to the limits of the roads to invite whomever they find. So, according to Pope Francis, God will never stop calling us, even if we lose interest in God. What about you? Will you still going after your children, helping your children, assisting your spouse, even if you lost interest in that part of your investment, part of your love maybe, experiences? To the limits of the roads. And our translations is to the main roads. But I'm glad that Pope Francis used this expression, to the limits of the roads, to go extend beyond whatever that we may need to do to invite people into the banquet of the Lord. So Pope Francis continued here. This is how God reacts. When he is rejected, rather than giving up, he starts over and asks that all those found at the thoroughfares be called, excluding no one. You and I have been rejected before. Maybe it's something in these parables that we want to learn not to give up. But even if we have to start all over again, we need to do it. So the second idea is as to why we reject God in our life or reject our loved ones has to do with insecurities. For me, not just any other types of insecurity. What I call it, or what psychologists call it, chronic insecurities. Where it could lead to deep depressions or it could lead to deep anger. And this insecurities cause every part of your being not able to engage in your daily life, not able to participate to the best of your abilities. And so in chronic insecurity, certain things happen. You need to keep asking for reassurance because you are so unsure with yourself. You keep wanting that affirmations over and over and over again in relationship or even at work. And sometimes it can be very frustrating when that's happening. Second, jealousy or accusatory statement in relationship could also be an outward sign of insecurities. But when you do it so much, you become so like, what we call it, a hawk. And that just creates so much more. And maybe your hawking styles is a projections of your insecurities. The other part that we come to see in insecurity, it is this. It has to do with attachment or separations. Sometimes we attach so much to certain individuals or our parents when we grow up. Certain of that attachment can cause us, or a quick separations in our early upbringing can also cause us to be insecure. So part of the insecure has to come and ask us this question internally. The majority of relationship insecurity is based on irrational thoughts and fears that you are not good enough, that you will not be okay without your loved ones, that you will never find anyone better, that you are not truly lovable. So again, insecurity is not something that's outside of you, outside of me, but it's all internal. Self-talk. So sometimes when we don't deal with chronic insecurity, this could happen, as it describes here in the parables. Some ignored the invitation, went away. The rest laid hold of his servants, mistreated them, and killed them. So mistreatment can also, unkindness to each other can be the fact that there is that deep insecurity in all of us. So how do we overcome part of our own insecurities so that we can climb the mountain of the Lord? Whether as a family or as individuals, whether with your spouse or without your spouse, or with a community of faith here as a church, that we're going to climb this mountain of the Lord and see that mountaintop. Because that mountaintop is what we are aspired to do and accomplish. So here is Dr. Kristin Neff. Her research is on self-compassion. Can I help us to overcome our own self-insecurities, or what she calls chronic insecurities? 3 steps. Self-kindness instead of self-judgment. Second, mindfulness instead of over-identifications with thoughts and feelings. Third, common humanity instead of isolations. So the first, self-kindness instead of self-judgment. It helps us to look within ourselves that we are not perfect. That not everything, even if we plan a perfect wedding banquet, something's going to go wrong. Let it go. Because I have seen inter-families fight over a wedding banquet. Who sits where? And who's going to be the sponsors of this wedding banquet? Who's going to walk down the aisles with it? And so that could happen. So that perfectionist, and when we look at self-compassion, we learn to let go. We also learn to let go of that control in many ways. When we realize that there are certain things you can't do it anymore at a certain age, you just gotta let go. And sometimes it's harder to do than to say. But that self-compassion or self-kindness is so important. It's not about denying our shortcomings or feeling victimized, but rather empowered to feel positively toward ourselves as we face life struggles and challenges. So now practice mindfulness as a way also to help to center ourselves, to reduce our tendency to ruminate problems, negative thinking that are not conducive to growth and change. And that's the consequences to insecurities. We keep bringing problems from the past, problems from the present, and cause it an obstacle to climb to the mountaintop. So our insecure thoughts can undermine our motivation and initiative. So self-compassion then turn down our anxiety and orient us to make real changes in our lives. And finally, adopting a sense of our common humanity, allowing us to seek ourselves as other or different. That what your insecurity is not unique. Your insecurity is also maybe someone also experienced the same situations of your own journey. And so part of this whole area is to reduce the tendency to take on as a victim. That you have been abused, you've been hurt by people. Or also to avoid that whole idea of a narcissistic point of view, that it's always about me. So how and why do you want to climb that mountaintop? It's so important. Who do you want to accompany you on this mountaintop? So in every journey, you have to move from the wedding banquet to the mountaintop. Because if you stay in the wedding banquet alone, you haven't grown. You are subconsciously rejecting the path toward God's kingdom. And so Isaiah gave us beautiful image of the mountaintop. On this mountain, the Lord of hosts will provide for all peoples a feast of rich food and choice wines. On this mountain, he will destroy the veils that veils all peoples. Maybe he will help you to unveil, to see your real interest in your life, to help you to unveil your chronic insecurities that you may have. On this mountain, the Lord will wipe away the tears from every face. And on this mountain, we will all say, behold our God, to whom we look to save us. So why do people still reject who God is?